we haven't made the match LED yet. So let's do that right now as well before we copy and paste. Let's go down to the bottom of our script and let's think about this match option. So how do we think about the match function? We're going to put it like an LED next to each of the load buttons, and we want that LED to light up if that load button has been pressed. But do we really want it based on the button itself? If the button was pressed to light up the LED? What if other things in this design recall one of these presets? We want actual feedback from the actual camera to drive our LED's matchiness rather than just rely on the fake feedback of us pressing the button and sending it forward. So we want to validate whether a match should be on or not based on the incoming actual PTZ text string, right? That's what we want to look at. How can we use that to turn on our match? I'm going to say first thing we should do, let's just make a function out of it. We know this is going to take a little bit of logic, so let's make a function so that we can put that function in the mess of stuff we just did wherever it is appropriate. So make a new function, and I'm going to call this check if match. And if you think about it, this function is a whole lot like the interlocking buttons we've made several times in this class, right? We want one thing to be on, and we want the other things to be off, no matter what. And the thing we want to turn on turns on based on a certain condition. Well, we've done this a lot of times already. We've shown you so many ways to make conditional or to make interlocking buttons throughout the course of the class. You could probably choose any of them. For the sake of brevity, let's just show the pieces, and we'll do it by doing an if-else statement. So first thing we want to do whenever we make an interlocking button system is we turn them all off. So I'm going to say, hey, your preset LEDs, let's set preset LEDs all to be false. And then we will grab a flow control, and we want to say there are several possible else ifs here. If it matches the first preset, if it matches the second preset, if it matches the third preset. Now we know what the do's are. Let's fill those in first, because if it matches the first preset, then what are we going to do? We're going to make the first preset LED Boolean true, right? If it matches the second preset, it's going to make the second preset LED true. If it matches the third preset, it'll turn the third preset LED true. That's easy. Okay, but how do we validate whether or not it matches it? Here again is one of those comparators that we were just talking about. We were talking about how we could have used a equal comparator to find out if the flag is true or not. Here, we need to compare our two text strings. Jeff said it earlier. He's going to put both text strings on the UCI and let the user decide. Well, that tells us what we need. We do indeed need to just look at text string number 1 and look at text string number 2. So grab your operators. We want this logic block. I know sometimes it feels weird to use an equal sign on two things that aren't numbers, because equals generally seems to me like it's numbers are equal, but you can compare two strings as well. If the strings are equal, this will validate as a true, and that gives us the condition we need. So let's just fill it in. If the actual PTZ string is equal to the storage preset number 1 string, that is what will validate that our camera matches our first save spot. And I'll do the same thing for number 2, and the same thing for number 3. That there is our check if match function. That will turn all the LEDs off, and then when the camera is there, it will turn the LED on. Okay, I'll collapse the function. The question is, when do we want that function to occur? Jeff, when do we check the LEDs?
Well, we certainly should check if the actual PTZ coordinates change.
Certainly.
We probably also should check when we start.
All right, So when the actual PTZ coordinates change, that sounds like an event handler. The actual PTZ coordinate change, whenever that changes, let's run this function. That means that whenever we have saved over that field, it'll event it, right? Whenever the camera moves, it'll bring in that event and it'll check the functions. Perfect. The other thing you said was whenever we release the button. Yeah?
No, I said when we started.
When we started.
But I agree. We should do it when we poke the button. That would be a good time.
So let's do it when we poke the button. Before you poke the button or after you're done poking the button?
You probably after.
Probably after. Because after you've released it, that's when it is setting it, and we want to check if match at the end of our entire function right
Yeah,
there.
I think that's a good place.
Yeah. Now keep in mind that when you do release it, the camera is still moving, so the event handler might not catch it in time, but the fact that the camera is moving will constantly trigger this event handler to check the function as well. So
Yep.
this is probably more of a safety, but this is probably the one that's really going to work out for us. Have we finished it?
We did. Guess how I did it?
How did you do? Did you do some Lua?
I did Lua code.
Okay, listen, before we get to Jeff's Lua code, what we have done is we've only done it for the first button. We now would need to duplicate this for the other buttons. So what does that mean? If I zoom out a little bit, we like this entire event handler. I'm going to duplicate it. I'll duplicate it over here, and then let's change all of the fields that we need to do for button number 2. So it's press and hold button number 2 change. If press and button hold number 2 is Boolean, then we're going to look in storage number 2 string, or we're going to save to storage number 2 string. And debug window, if we'd wanted to specify which preset was changed, we could have done it there too. But I think that's going to take care of us pretty well. Okay, and then we copy and paste that again for number 3. Now, this does feel like a lot of work. We've done this several times in class where we make something long and then we have to go through and manually change all of the 2s to 3s or the 1s to 2s and stuff like that. This is that instance when I was talking about where, boy, it sure would be nice if we could just take this index, shove it into that one and that one and that one, and basically do this once rather than 3 times. And as we've said before, that is one of the places where the block controller has its limits, because you can't quite do that. But Jeff could do this much faster with some Lua.
Yep, but you're going to have to come to the next class to see it.
So yeah, in the next class, all this is handled with one instance of this event handler, essentially, and it runs a loop, and it does pass basically the index of the button into the loop so that you don't need to copy and paste and potentially make mistakes when you copy and paste. It does it all for you.
Yep, and you would be amazed, it's like 20 lines of code.
Last thing I want to comment about on this is that it's, well, if you want to go back to your design, make sure that it does fully function now. So if I press and hold, I move the camera, press and hold and release. Yes, button number 2 is recalled. And look, our LED for number 2 lights up. Move it over here, make a save for button number 3, press and hold and release. Yes, number 3 lights up. You'll notice the moment that the camera starts moving in any capacity, those LEDs deactivate because it no longer matches. That's the event handler passing in. I can load this one. When it gets there, it recalls my LED. That's all lovely. This is working perfectly the way that we want it to. And because we use control pins, I could then very, very easily just copy and paste this entire block and wire its control pins to my second camera to make the second camera work the exact same way. Just grab those buttons out and put them on the other layer of your UCI for camera level 2. Beautiful, done. You may have thought to yourself, this isn't really a press and hold. It's really a press and hold and release. It doesn't do the thing until you release your finger. Some people might want it to actually do the thing while you're still pressing it. Like again, you think about your car and you're saving your radio station. When you're holding it, it beeps at you, and that's how you know you can now release because it's gotten some feedback that you did the thing. So you may want to add some functionality to your system that would do that. But the reality is it's not actually that hard. If you wanted to do that, all you would do is you would take these lines of code that happen when you release, when the flag is true, when you release it. If you have held it long enough for the flag to go high, you just remove all of this and you just drop it up here and put it part of the timer that occurs when it goes high. And that means that this will happen when the timer elapses and it's done it. You've just moved those lines of code and it works. Now, for me, like the thing I was just describing, I might actually like add like another bit of code in here that gives some like feedback on the UCI that lights up that the thing has occurred. Or you play a little ding. I will say this though, because we did this with the block controller and we weren't able to do it with a loop the way Jeff will be doing it later, if you were to do that now, well, you're going to have a little bit of a problem because no matter what, this flag is now targeting camera preset number 1. And we are using our one press and hold timer for all 3 of our buttons. So if you want to do that in this script, you would then have to actually make 3 different timers and 3 different flags, one that's dedicated for each of the 3 buttons, so that each of those has its own thing that happens that lights it up. We're not going to go down that route, but I want to show it to you because if you try to do that right now, you'd quickly realize, wait, this isn't working. It's only doing it for camera preset number 1. I will also note that if you do that, then down here, our if statement looks a little weird because it says if true, and then there's actually nothing that's occurring whatsoever in the if part of this. And that just feels a little weird. So if you did do this, what I would actually do is I would then make all of this occur in the if, and then I would actually just negate the if by throwing a not in there. And that just makes it look a little bit nicer so you don't have a giant if statement that doesn't resolve to anything at all. And one last thing, I want you to take a look at this code right here. We built those interlocking LED buttons a little bit ago using long if-else statements, even though we showed you how to do infinitely scalable interlocks previously in the class, and you may be wondering, why are we going back? Well, in this case, there were only 3 LEDs, so it wasn't really a big deal to just do 3 if-elses. But if you had more of them, if you had 3, 10, 20, 100 LEDs, that if-else statement would have been too long to create on its own. So can you use a for loop to write something that will accommodate every single one of the LEDs in an array at the same time? Yes, you absolutely can. It may look a little strange, but just stare at this, see if you can decipher it, read it on your own, figure out if that is something you could have gotten to on your own by thinking it through. This is how you would do it with a for loop, if that's how you wanted to do this function instead.
Before we move forward, what I did do in my version of the checking the LED feedback is I used basically that same piece of Lua code that Nate wrote in the immediately previous video. So I took what you've already seen and I basically applied that same idea.
That's the handoff right there. I mean, we're done with this class. If it has piqued your interest in going farther with actual Lua coding and doing those slicker, more efficient loops, then take the advanced version of the class from Jeff. Same process, most of it's online, and then you wrap it up with about a 4-hour session with a live instructor. For you, save your file. Save your file. If you haven't been doing that, always do it anyways. Make sure it's saved. You're going to upload that file as proof that you completed the class, and then that's how you get your credits for having attended all of this. Anyways, we're proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Me too.
Thank you very much for being here. Go and make glorious code. Don't forget, think it out. Debug along the way. If you're going to do things twice, make it a function or a variable. And keep things simple and efficient whenever you can. Thank you very much.